Labyrinth, a novel based on the Jim Henson film by ACH Smith, read by Rose in the Library. At that moment, she spotted a curious robed figure strolling across the lawn, apparently deep in thought. Where had he come from? He was an old man with a long white mustache and white eyebrows. But the most striking thing about him was his hat, which was topped with the head of a bird, with a sharp beak and eyes that were darting glances everywhere. "Excuse me," Sarah called, running across the lawn after the old man. With his slow stride, furrowed brow, bent head, and hands clasped behind his back, he appeared very wise. Surely he could be of more help to her than the runty pipsqueak she had had to rely upon till now. He was settling gravely down on a garden bench as she approached. "Please," she said, "can you help me?" The wise man didn't really register Sarah's presence. It was true that he raised his face toward her, but only as one might gaze at a tree, a fly, or a cloud while lost in thought. Rather than her, he seemed to be seeing a far horizon beyond her, so far beyond that few mortals had ever scanned it. The depth and range of his thinking was clearly vast, whatever the subject of his thoughts might be. He was probably pondering deeply upon some problem that Sarah had never even imagined. Was it mathematical, she wondered, like the square root of -2? Or philosophical, the meaning of meaning, perhaps? But no, those were things she'd at least tried to imagine when she read about them. Those great eyes gazing right through her were more likely preoccupied with some question of physics, or biochemistry, or linguistics, or all of that at once and more. "Please?" she repeated timidly. The bird's head on the wise man's hat suddenly spoke. "Go away! Can't you see he's thinking?" The wise man slowly raised a finger and rolled his eyes up toward the bird and spoke. "Shh," he said. Sarah closed her mouth apologetically. She stood aside and waited. "And don't stare," the hat reprimanded her. "You'll put him off." "I'm sorry." The wise man's lips opened slowly, and his eyes turned upward again to address the hat. "Silence," he commanded. The hat looked wryly at Sarah. "This is the thanks I get," it said disgustedly. "Where was I?" the wise man was asking. "How should I know?" the hat chirped. "You're the big thinker." The wise man noticed Sarah. "Ah, a young girl." Sarah returned a polite little smile. The wise man's gaze traveled downward and settled on Hoggle. "And this is your brother?" "Oh, no," Sarah answered. "He's just a friend." Hoggle had been about to expostulate at being taken for Sarah's brother, but now he stopped and looked sideways at Sarah. It was the first time anyone had called him a friend. He frowned. The wise man took a long breath. "And what can I do for you?" he asked Sarah. "Please," she said, feeling shy and a little confused to be conversing with an ancient sage about what must seem to him so trivial a matter. "Can you tell me, that is, I must get to the castle, but I can't even get out of this garden." Every time I try to leave, I find myself right back here again. I can see the castle over there, but can you tell me, please, how I can get to it?"
"Ah."
The wise man nodded slowly, closing his eyes. After a while he said,
"So, you want to get to the castle.
How's that for brain power?"
demanded the bright-eyed hat.
"Quiet,"
the wise man commanded.
"Ah, nuts,"
the hat replied. Sarah put a hand over her mouth to conceal a giggle. The wise man composed his hands together on his lap.
"So, young woman,"
he told her, pursing his lips in thought. Nodding, he explained,
"the way forward is sometimes the way back."
His hat pulled a face.
"Will you listen to this crap?"
The wise man was glaring upward and clenching his fingers. He cleared his throat.
"And sometimes,"
he continued, gazing earnestly at Sarah again,
"the way backward
"Is the way forward," the hat interrupted. "Can you believe it? I ask you."
"Will you be quiet?"
the wise man ordered his hat profoundly. He looked again at Sarah.
"Quite often, young lady, it seems we're not getting anywhere, when in fact we are."
Sarah looked despairingly around the garden. "Well, I'm certainly not getting anywhere at the moment."
"Join the club," said the hat.
"Perhaps," the wise man said, "perhaps it only seems like that. All is not always what—"
It appeared that he was drifting off into a reverie on the nature of good and evil, possibly, a four-dimensional calculus, and he only just made it to the end of his sentence.
"It seems."
The hat peered down over the wise man's forehead, then looked perkily up at Sarah and Hoggle.
"I think that's your lot," the hat said. "The sum total of earthly wisdom strewn at your feet for the asking. Please leave a contribution in the box."
Sarah noticed for the first time that the wise man had absent-mindedly drawn a collection box with a slot from the folds of his robe, and now was sitting, quite abstracted in contemplation, with the box on his knee. As she looked at it, he gave it a discreet little shake. What was she to do? She hesitated, then had the idea of donating one of the badges from Hoggle's string, which she was still holding. He read her mind.
"Don't you dare," Hoggle barked. "Them's mine."
Sarah paused and finally slid her mother's costume ring off her finger. Hoggle watched her drop it in the collecting box and looked green. He thought he was going to get that, too.
"Thank you so kindly," the hat said, sounding like a fairground barker. "Move along, please."
As they walked away across the garden, Hoggle said,
"You didn't have to give that away. He didn't tell you nothing."
"Well," Sarah said reflectively, "he said something about the way forward being sometimes the way back. We haven't gotten anywhere so far trying to go out forward, so why don't we try walking out backward? It might work." Hoggle's expression was skeptical, but he humored her by doing as she suggested. They walked backward through the gap in the hedge from which Sarah had last emerged, and the garden remained in peaceful silence, decorated with birdsong. The The hat was watching where they had gone. When they did not return, it chirped.
Well, what do you know? They took your advice.
Zzz, the wise man said, having dozed off after so much mental travail. His hat cocked an eye down at him.
It's so stimulating being your hat.
Zzz, the wise man concurred.